Ladies and gentlemen, life, as we experience it, is a grand, flowing river. Yet too often we find ourselves expending precious energy fighting against its current, trying to rearrange the rocks or chasing after reflections we think are treasures. Today I invite you to explore 5 places not to waste your energy, to reclaim that vitality and let it propel you forward. First, stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Life dances to its own rhythm, independent of our desires. The weather doesn't consult us, and neither does fate. Resisting this truth is like shouting at the wind. Instead, align yourself with what is rather than clinging to what you wish it to be. Second, let go of the past. Regrets are heavy chains forged by events you cannot change. They tether you to a time that no longer exists. Break free by understanding that every mistake, every stumble, was a lesson in disguise. The present moment is lighter when you carry only its weight. Third, stop fearing the future. The road ahead is always unknown, yet our minds fill it with imagined catastrophes. Why? To shield ourselves from what might never happen. Trust instead in your ability to handle whatever comes. The energy spent fearing is energy lost to living. Fourth, disengage from fruitless arguments. Not everyone is ready to hear what you have to say. Some minds are locked doors, and no amount of knocking will open them. Reserve your energy for conversations that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Finally, abandon the quest for external validation. Life is not a performance judged by an audience. The applause of others is fleeting, the approval you give yourself is eternal. Celebrate who you are without needing the world's permission. In closing, life is not about how much you can do, control, or accumulate. It's about how you choose to spend your energy. Redirect it toward growth, love, and joy, and you'll find that the river carries you effortlessly toward a richer experience of living. The illusion of control is one of the most persistent and deeply ingrained tendencies in human nature. We are creatures who crave certainty, who strive to shape the world around us, believing that with enough effort, intelligence, or willpower, we can bend reality to our desires. Yet, despite our best efforts, life often refuses to conform. This dissonance can lead to frustration, disappointment, and a continuous cycle of futile exertion, draining our energy in ways we seldom realize. At its core, the illusion of control stems from our desire to feel safe and secure. We believe that by taking charge, we can shield ourselves from chaos and unpredictability. This belief provides a temporary sense of comfort, as if we are the architects of our destiny. But the truth is far more nuanced. While we can influence certain aspects of our lives, much of what happens lies beyond our control. Weather patterns, other people's thoughts and actions, unforeseen events, and even our own bodies often defy our attempts to manage them. Recognizing this reality is not about resigning to fate, it is about understanding the limits of our power and learning to work with, rather than against, the forces around us. Consider how much energy is wasted trying to control outcomes that are inherently unpredictable. We plan meticulously, set rigid goals, and stress over every detail, hoping to ensure success or avoid failure. Yet even the best laid plans can unravel due to circumstances we never anticipated. This is not to say planning is futile. Preparation and foresight have their place, but clinging to the idea that we can guarantee a specific result sets us up for inevitable frustration. Life is too dynamic, too fluid, to be boxed into the confines of our expectations. Another way the illusion of control manifests is in our relationships with others. How often do we attempt to change the opinions, behaviors, or decisions of those around us? We argue, persuade, and sometimes manipulate, convinced that we know what is best. But people are not puzzles to be solved or machines to be programmed. They are complex, autonomous beings with their own experiences, emotions, and choices. Trying to control others not only fails, but also strains relationships and breeds resentment. Genuine connection flourishes not from control, but from mutual respect and understanding. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of the illusion of control is how it extends to our inner worlds. We believe we can completely govern our thoughts, emotions, and desires, but anyone who has tried to suppress an intrusive thought or ignore a persistent feeling knows how elusive such mastery can be. The harder we fight against our own nature, the more energy we waste. True peace comes not from controlling our inner experience, but from observing it with compassion and letting it flow naturally, like a stream finding its course. Letting go of the illusion of control does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It is not about giving up, but about shifting our perspective. Instead of fighting reality, we learn to dance with it. Instead of clinging to outcomes, we invest in the process. Instead of resisting change, we adapt. This approach requires humility, a recognition that we are not omnipotent, that we are part of a larger interconnected system where not everything revolves around our desires. Paradoxically, releasing the need for control often leads to greater freedom and power. When we stop wasting energy on the impossible, we free ourselves to focus on what we can truly influence: our actions, attitudes, and responses. By embracing uncertainty, we open ourselves to possibilities we might never have imagined. By accepting the flow of life, we become more resilient, adaptable, and at peace. The illusion of control is seductive, but it is also a trap. It binds us to a relentless cycle of effort and disappointment, obscuring the beauty and spontaneity of life. To break free, we must recognize its hold and choose to walk a different path, one of acceptance, trust, and alignment with the ever-changing rhythms of existence. In doing so, we reclaim the energy we once squandered and discover a deeper, more harmonious way of living. The burden of past regrets is a weight many of us carry, often without fully realizing its toll. These regrets take the form of memories that replay in our minds, pulling us back to moments we wish had unfolded differently. Perhaps it's a harsh word we spoke, a missed opportunity, or a choice that led us down a difficult path. Whatever the nature of these regrets, they share a common trait: they anchor us to a time that no longer exists and rob us of the vitality we could bring to the present. Regret is a natural human emotion. It arises from our ability to reflect, to imagine how things might have been, and to compare our actions to an ideal we hold in our minds. This capacity is a gift that allows us to learn from our mistakes and grow. However, when regret becomes chronic, when it transforms into a persistent shadow that looms over our lives, it becomes a burden rather than a teacher. At its worst, it can trap us in a cycle of self-recrimination, as we revisit the same painful memories and punish ourselves for decisions we cannot undo. One of the most insidious aspects of past regrets is their tendency to distort our perception of ourselves. We often view our past actions through the lens of hindsight, a perspective that is inherently unfair. The clarity we have now was not available to us then. We made choices based on the knowledge, circumstances, and emotions we had at the time. Yet we judge ourselves harshly, as though we should have possessed foresight or wisdom we did not yet acquire. This self-critical narrative erodes our self-esteem and fosters a sense of inadequacy. Regret also saps our energy by keeping us mentally tethered to moments we cannot change. The mind, endlessly ruminating on the what-ifs and if-onlys, becomes trapped in a loop. This mental replay not only drains our emotional reserves, but also distracts us from the opportunities and joys of the present. It's like trying to drive forward while constantly looking in the rearview mirror. The road ahead becomes obscured, and we risk missing the beauty and potential that lie before us. Another dimension of regret is its relationship with forgiveness, both of others and of ourselves. Often we carry regret not only for what we did, but also for what we allowed to happen. We may blame ourselves for trusting the wrong person, for not speaking up, or for failing to act in a moment of need. This self-blame can be particularly heavy as it intertwines with feelings of shame and guilt. Forgiveness, in this context, becomes an act of liberation. It is not about excusing what happened or denying its impact, but about releasing ourselves from the endless cycle of judgment and blame. To let go of past regrets, we must first confront them with honesty and compassion. Denying or suppressing these feelings only gives them more power. Instead, we can acknowledge the pain they bring and examine them with a curious, non-judgmental attitude. What can we learn from these regrets? How have they shaped who we are today? When we approach regret as a teacher rather than a tormentor, we transform its weight into wisdom. It is also essential to recognize that the past does not define us. While our actions and experiences shape our journey, they are not the entirety of who we are. Each moment offers a chance to redefine ourselves, to act in alignment with the lessons we've learned, and to create a future that reflects our values. Regret, then, becomes a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block, a reminder of our humanity and a catalyst for growth. The burden of past regrets is heavy, but it is not immovable. By forgiving ourselves, embracing the lessons regret offers, and redirecting our focus to the present, we can lighten this load. Life is far too fleeting to spend it bound to a past that cannot be undone. Every breath we take is an invitation to release what no longer serves us and to step forward with greater clarity, courage, and self-compassion. In doing so, we reclaim not only our energy but also our freedom to live fully in the here and now. The mirage of future fears is a powerful force that often grips our minds and robs us of the peace and clarity available in the present. These fears are like shadows cast by possibilities that have not yet materialized, projections of what might go wrong, or challenges that we imagine could arise. While some concern for the future is practical and even necessary for planning and preparation, the overwhelming majority of our future-oriented fears are baseless. They exist only in our minds, feeding on uncertainty and draining our energy. The mind has an extraordinary ability to envision scenarios which has been vital for human survival. This ability to anticipate danger and prepare for challenges helped our ancestors navigate a perilous world. However, in modern life, this same tendency often spirals into overthinking, creating problems where none exist and amplifying anxieties about situations that may never occur. The mind becomes a fertile ground for worst-case scenarios, exaggerating risks and minimizing our capacity to handle them. Future fears are deceptive because they feel so real. The more we dwell on them, the more vivid and plausible they seem. We might imagine a failed career, financial ruin, a broken relationship, or a health crisis, and our bodies respond as though these imagined events are happening. Our heart rate increases, our breathing becomes shallow, and stress hormones flood our system. This physiological reaction reinforces the illusion, convincing us that our fears are valid and must be addressed immediately. Yet in most cases, these fears are nothing more than mental constructs, reflections of our insecurities rather than realities. One of the most damaging effects of future fears is their ability to paralyze us. When we focus too much on what might go wrong, we hesitate to act. We procrastinate, avoid risks, or cling to the familiar, fearing that any deviation could lead to disaster. This paralysis can prevent us from pursuing our dreams, embracing opportunities, or taking necessary steps toward growth. Ironically, in trying to avoid imagined failures, we create real ones by staying stuck. Future fears also distort our relationship with the present. The energy spent worrying about what might happen diverts our attention from what is happening. Life unfolds moment by moment, and each moment contains its own opportunities, challenges, and beauty. When we are consumed by fears of the future, we miss these moments entirely. It is as though we are living in a fog, unable to see or appreciate the gifts of the here and now. Letting go of future fears requires a shift in perspective. First, we must recognize them for what they are: thoughts, not truths. A fear about the future is a product of the imagination, a possibility among countless others. By observing these fears without judgment, we can begin to detach from their grip. Mindfulness practices such as meditation or deep breathing can help anchor us in the present and create a space between ourselves and our fears. Another antidote to future fears is trust in ourselves and in life. Many of our fears stem from a lack of confidence in our ability to handle uncertainty. Yet if we look back on our lives, we often find evidence of resilience. We have faced challenges before, adapted to unexpected changes, and emerged stronger. This history of perseverance is a reminder that we are capable of navigating whatever comes our way, even if the path is unclear. It is also helpful to question the validity of our fears. How likely is it that the worst-case scenario will occur? If it does, what steps could we take to address it? Often simply examining our fears with a critical eye reveals their exaggerated nature. We begin to see that, while some outcomes are possible, they are far from inevitable, and many are manageable. Ultimately, the mirage of future fears dissolves when we return to the present. The future is not something we can control, it is an unfolding mystery. By focusing on what we can do today, on the actions, choices, and attitudes within our reach, we reclaim our power. Life is too fleeting and precious to spend it worrying about what might never come. The more we embrace the present, the less sway our fears hold, and the more freely we can move toward a future shaped not by anxiety but by hope and intention. Arguing with closed minds is one of the most exhausting and fruitless endeavors we can engage in, yet it is a trap many of us fall into repeatedly. The desire to change someone's perspective, to convince them of what we believe to be right or true, can feel urgent and even righteous. However, when the person on the other side of the conversation is unwilling or unable to open themselves to new ideas, the effort becomes an exercise in futility. It drains our energy, strains relationships, and often leaves us feeling frustrated and disheartened. Closed-mindedness arises from a variety of sources: fear, pride, ignorance, or a deeply entrenched worldview. For some, their beliefs are tightly interwoven with their identity, making any challenge to those beliefs feel like a personal attack. When someone perceives an argument not as an exchange of ideas but as a threat to their sense of self, they are unlikely to engage meaningfully. Instead, they may become defensive, dig in their heels, and retreat further into their own perspective. One of the most frustrating aspects of arguing with a closed mind is the lack of genuine dialogue. In a healthy exchange, both parties listen, reflect, and remain open to the possibility of being influenced or changed. But with a closed mind, there is no true listening, only waiting for a turn to respond. Words become weapons in a battle to win rather than tools for understanding. In such interactions, even the most logical or heartfelt argument is unlikely to make a dent because the other person is not receptive to hearing it. This kind of argument often escalates into a cycle of frustration. The more resistance we encounter, the harder we push, believing that if we just explain ourselves more clearly or present more compelling evidence, the other person will finally see reason. But this rarely happens. Instead, our persistence can reinforce their resistance, making them even more entrenched in their position. The harder we try, the less progress we make, leaving both sides further apart than when the conversation began. Arguing with closed minds also takes an emotional toll. It's not just the energy spent crafting arguments or trying to remain calm in the face of stubbornness, it's the sense of futility and disappointment that follows. We may walk away feeling unheard, unappreciated, or even disrespected. Over time, repeatedly engaging in these kinds of arguments can erode our peace of mind and strain our relationships, especially if the closed mind belongs to someone we care about. The wiser course of action is to redirect our energy. Instead of trying to force open a closed mind, we can focus on fostering conversations with those who are willing to engage. Open-minded dialogue is a space of growth where both parties can learn from each other and explore new ideas. It is in these exchanges that true understanding and progress occur. By choosing where and with whom we invest our energy, we create opportunities for meaningful connection rather than draining ourselves in futile conflicts. Letting go of the need to argue with closed minds is not about giving up or admitting defeat. It is about recognizing that change cannot be imposed from the outside, it must come from within. A closed mind will not open through force or insistence, it opens when the person is ready, often through their own experiences and reflections. In the meantime, we can lead by example, embodying openness, curiosity, and respect in our interactions with others. Ultimately, arguing with closed minds is a choice, and it is one we can choose to avoid. By walking away from fruitless debates, we protect our energy and focus on the connections and conversations that truly matter. We learn to accept that not every mind will change, not every heart will open, and that is okay. Our role is not to control others, but to engage with the world in a way that reflects our own values of understanding, patience, and peace. Chasing external validation is a pursuit that, though deeply ingrained in human behavior, often leads us further away from genuine happiness and self-fulfillment. At its core, the desire for validation stems from our need for connection and acceptance. As social beings, we naturally seek acknowledgement and approval from others as a way to feel valued and secure. However, when this need becomes a driving force in our lives, it creates a cycle of dependency that can leave us feeling hollow and disconnected from our true selves. The quest for external validation often begins innocently enough. A kind word from a loved one, recognition for hard work, or a compliment on our achievements can bring a sense of joy and affirmation. But over time, this can morph into a habit of seeking approval to define our worth. We start measuring our value by how others perceive us rather than by our own standards. This external focus causes us to chase validation in ways that are unsustainable and ultimately unfulfilling. One of the most insidious aspects of chasing external validation is how it shapes our decisions and behavior. Instead of acting in alignment with our authentic desires and values, we may adjust ourselves to fit the expectations of others. This can lead to a kind of performance, where we present a version of ourselves that we think will be admired or accepted. While this might bring temporary applause or praise, it often leaves us feeling disconnected from who we really are. The cost of such approval is steep. It can erode our authenticity and create a lingering sense of emptiness. In our modern world, this tendency is amplified by social media and other platforms where likes, shares, and comments become a currency for validation. The need to be seen and celebrated by an audience, even if they are strangers, can become an addictive cycle. We curate our lives for public consumption, chasing metrics of approval that provide only fleeting satisfaction. Yet no matter how many likes or accolades we accumulate, the hunger for more remains insatiable because external validation is never enough to fill an internal void. The antidote to this cycle is cultivating a sense of self-worth that is independent of others' opinions. This begins with recognizing that our value is intrinsic. It does not depend on external circumstances or the approval of others. Building this inner foundation requires self-reflection and self-compassion. It means embracing our imperfections, celebrating our achievements for their own sake, and living in alignment with our values and passions. When we validate ourselves, we free ourselves from the constant need for external reassurance. True fulfillment comes from living authentically and honoring who we are, rather than who we think we need to be for others. By letting go of the chase for external validation, we create space to experience deeper connections, genuine self-love, and a life that feels aligned and meaningful. It is in this freedom that we discover a more lasting and profound sense of worth, one that cannot be given or taken away by others. Perfectionism is a double-edged sword, often disguised as a virtue but carrying hidden costs that can weigh heavily on our lives. At its surface, it may seem like the pursuit of excellence, a relentless drive to do better, achieve more, or be flawless. Yet, beneath this polished exterior, perfectionism often stems from a fear of failure, rejection, or inadequacy. Rather than being a path to fulfillment, it becomes a source of constant pressure, self-doubt, and dissatisfaction. At its core, perfectionism is fueled by an unattainable standard. No matter how much effort is poured into achieving perfection, the goal always seems just out of reach. This is because perfection is a moving target, an abstract ideal that exists more in our minds than in reality. Even when significant achievements are made, the perfectionist mind often finds flaws or sets new benchmarks, leaving little room for celebration or contentment. This cycle perpetuates a feeling of never being good enough, no matter how much is accomplished. Perfectionism is particularly insidious because it masquerades as a strength. It's often praised in society, seen as a marker of ambition, discipline, or attention to detail. Yet the perfectionist mindset is rarely about the joy of creating or excelling. It's about avoiding criticism, meeting external expectations, or proving self-worth. This external focus can strip the joy from activities and reduce them to mere tasks that must be executed flawlessly, turning passion into pressure. One of the most detrimental effects of perfectionism is its ability to paralyze. The fear of making mistakes or falling short can lead to procrastination or an unwillingness to take risks. Rather than starting a project or pursuing a goal, perfectionists may delay indefinitely, waiting for the perfect moment or feeling prepared enough. This avoidance, ironically, prevents growth and progress, the very things perfectionists often strive for. Perfectionism also takes a toll on mental and emotional well-being. The constant self-criticism and pressure to meet impossible standards can lead to anxiety, stress, and burnout. Relationships may suffer as well, as perfectionists often hold others to the same rigid expectations they impose on themselves. This can create tension, as few people are willing or able to meet such standards consistently. Ignoring your inner voice may seem easier in the short term, but it ultimately leads to a life that feels disconnected and untrue to who you are. By tuning in and respecting this inner guidance, you reclaim your power to navigate life with clarity, confidence, and integrity. Listening to your intuition fosters authenticity and a deeper sense of purpose, leading to a more fulfilling and aligned existence.